This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Have you ever got a feeling that your phone is spying on you?
An app asking for camera permission, which looks like a very legitimate use case for it having access to camera, but then it turning on camera without your consent and taking pictures, getting into your privacy, and almost knowing everything about you.
They can still track you, they can still look at your camera, they can still click photos of you, listen to your voice calls, even without you not realizing that the app is even running in your background. When consumers complain that their phones are overheating and are hot all the time, you have a malware on your phone which is taking up your CPU and probably doing Bitcoining or watching videos on your behalf.
I never thought my phone could be taking pictures without me knowing, or mining bitcoins for somebody else, or even watching videos behind my back. But here we are, living out our very own episode of Black Mirror. If that spooked you, you have no idea what you're in for in today's episode. Let's set the context, shall we? In a continued crackdown, the government banned 54 more Chinese apps last week, citing security reasons. These apps included several editing apps in addition to games and more.
And big news coming through. The government of India will ban 54 Chinese apps that pose a threat to India's security. And these include apps like Selfie Camera Equalizer and Bass Booster. There is a Beauty Camera. There is a Sweet Selfie HD.
This isn't the first time that we're seeing Chinese apps being banned in the country. So far, India has banned over 200 such apps, which include the extremely popular PUBG, aside from apps like TikTok, UC Browser, WeChat, and so on. Experts that ET spoke to said that the most recent ban is for banned apps that have been rechristened in order to dodge scrutiny or smaller players with not much credibility so that they can be eliminated from the ecosystem. In today's episode, we speak to Dhiraj Gupta, co-founder and CTO of mFilterit, and Faisal Kawoosa, founder of TechArc, to find out why Chinese apps in particular are being targeted. Is it only geopolitical reasons, or is there more to it? What exactly are these security concerns that the Indian government is worried about? And what can we, as users, look out for when we download these apps? Stay tuned till the very end and maybe even keep a pen and paper handy because we've got some great tips in here for how you can protect your data and privacy. It's Tuesday, the 22nd of February. I'm your host, Dia Rekhi, and you're listening to Digital Swachh Abhiyan on the Morning Brief. Let's start with the basics. I got Faisal to break down what the Chinese app ecosystem looks like.
I look at the ecosystem from this view that there are three major segments. One is a very credible segment wherein you see names like Tencent, and at the same time you see OEMs of, say, smartphones who also have apps as their offering of the total ecosystem out there. Like many of those are IoT players, some of them are in fintech. So they have their own app ecosystem. And then there is a third layer, which is very shady, so to say, where the reputation of the app publisher isn't known. You don't know much about them. That's how I look the ecosystem externally.
So, if you're wondering, Tencent is a Chinese multinational technology and entertainment conglomerate that operates the instant messengers Tencent QQ and WeChat in addition to other apps. Also, if you're wondering what an OEM is, in the hardware industry, an original equipment manufacturer or OEM usually refers to a company that builds a product designed for its end users. And now that we have that in place, I was curious to find out exactly what these security concerns were that the Indian government has been flagging with regard to these apps.
The intrinsic nature of digital, so to say, always puts users at risk. And then the second thing is you may give consent to so many permissions, for instance, using your microphone or allowing your camera to be used by the app. That may be for a certain use case, but then since you are given the permission, it can be used for anything out there. That's the main reason which raises these security risks or concerns, because if the app publisher isn't very credible, then you don't know how the data you have shared or information you are sharing is being used.
Aside from geopolitical reasons, I asked Dhiraj why Chinese apps in particular were being singled out. I mean, why not a Singaporean app being banned, for instance? It can't possibly be that only Chinese apps have these issues pertaining to privacy and data security, right?
I think their scale is much larger. Because of their ecosystem, they're able to penetrate much more in India than, say, a Singaporean app. How many Singapore apps do you even know about, right? I doubt that you would, because the ecosystem is very, very limited for them to be popular in India. But Chinese apps are able to ride the OEM ecosystem and are able to get a very high base very quickly, and then it becomes a problem. So definitely, I think I'm saying Chinese or no Chinese, we should definitely be protecting our economy, our country, our people to become more and more confident in the digital ecosystem, so that they can take advantage of the digital ecosystem. Uh, and but I think the focus on China is more of a result of the ecosystem which has tilted in the favor of China, where their apps are able to enter and have a much larger scale in India, which is why probably it looks like it is focused towards a country. But in my opinion, that's simply because of how the ecosystem has worked out right now in favor of that country.
Okay, so how do these apps flourish then? How do they reach this kind of scale in the first place? Why aren't they being nipped in the bud earlier?
It's simply because there is very little regulation in China. Most of the platform services of Google and Apple don't work in China, which means that it's a wild, wild west. You can actually experiment, test, play, earn a lot of revenue, uh, and improve your skills as a fraudster in China. And once you are ready and you have a good product, this allows fraudsters to earn a lot of money in the bank, reinvest it for improving and becoming more and more sophisticated. And then when they come out for the rest of the world, they are a large app player, probably would have millions of installs already, probably will have millions of dollars of revenue already, and they suddenly become a force to reckon with. Compared to, say, an Indian app who has to straight away deal with a lot of regulations from the platform itself. They have to spend a lot of money, which they might not get funding for straight away. And if they are going to do all of that, they might get kicked out. They will always have a fear that they'll get kicked out from the Google services, which means that they'll always try and play fair, or at least want to play fair for the fear of getting kicked out from the Play Store by Google automatically. Paytm, for example, got kicked out of the Play Store for a couple of weeks simply because Paytm was promoting a fantasy game, and Google said that this is almost like gambling, and their services didn't allow for that. So Paytm actually had to pull down the app, remove all references to the fantasy game, and then bring it back to the Play Store. Now, for an app like Paytm, taking a chance of getting kicked out from the Play Store has huge ramifications, and they will never ever be able to recover from it if actually they were permanently banned. So now imagine a startup going through the same process. And I think that's the benefit which Chinese apps have, because in China, they don't have those regulations and they don't have that fear, and they can play with it.
We've established that many of these apps that have been banned could fall under the shady category that Faisal mentioned earlier. And I'll buy that this ban was needed to protect our data from being stored in China. But the real reason is whether the ban has been effective. I got Faisal to give us his verdict.
There is some mechanism that, say, government or other bodies out there are checking and arriving at the apps which become suspicious. But the point is probably by the time we arrive at knowing them and by the time we implement a ban on such apps, they might resurface in other variant or in some name. That's one challenge, but then it has to be a real time and consistent effort. There has to be a real time third party mechanism in place within the country which is consistently monitoring this. For instance, I think in the telecom gear, we have this large debate about whether we should allow vendor A, vendor B. The issue out there is okay, there is still some scrutiny possible because it's a B2B transaction. But in case of apps, and as the smartphones reach out to hands which are not so digitally aware, it becomes very serious that everybody is potentially a threat or is put to risk.
In fact, ET had reported last week that several of these Chinese apps were very much operational in the Indian market under different names, or they were providing a different place of origin. So I asked Dhiraj how this works, and his answer made me feel like it was pretty much as easy as editing the age of an actor on Wikipedia.
An app is only identified by something called a package name. A package name is, if it's something like com.flipkart.android, that is, for example, the package name for Flipkart. Similarly, you have different package names for different apps. And basically, if I can take the code and put it under the new package name and publish it, then technically it's a new app, right? So the code can be the same, everything can be identical. I simply can just put it in the new package name and I have a new app. Of course, that's like 101, and I'm sure everyone will realize that. But you change the logo, you make a small tweak in the name, add a little change from red to green as a color, and that's it, right? And you're able to bypass the block. And consumers, if they're searching for the app, right? So if consumers have become comfortable with a certain name of the app, your name is very, very similar with a small tweak. It's fairly simple to duplicate, replicate yourself, make. In my opinion, Google and Apple needs to first up their game. Apple, to be honest, has been fairly successful. Their policies are more stringent, and that's why Apple has been generally more safer ecosystem. Google needs to definitely up its game. The amount of apps which end up going to the Google Play Store and are found to have malware and virus in them is embarrassingly high. Remember that platforms make a lot of money there. Google Play Store and App Store are very, very profitable. They charge huge amounts of subscription fees from app developers. Play Store services charges almost 30% from the developer. So 30% fees is huge for something like that. So all of that profitability should definitely be invested for improving the security of these stores. They're definitely doing a lot, but I think it needs to be improved more and more. That's one. That's the first line of defense. Second is that I think the government of India, A, because of the geopolitical reasons, B, because of Indian population being new to the digital ecosystem, it is increasing widely. It is a huge population which may not be educated. The protection, I think, becomes even more important for India, which means that the government of India needs to definitely also consider doing continuous scanning and checking and blocking apps. The third angle, in my opinion, which makes India even more important for the Indian government to do this is UPI. Because of the government's push towards digital payments have hugely increased in count, in transactions, and volumes, which means that the amount of fraud now is no longer connected on just data privacy or malware or adware where someone is watching ads on your phone. Maybe it has actual financial implications. I think we need to have a digital Swachh Abhiyan, and I would strongly recommend the government of India to bring the digital ecosystem with more cleaner.
And it doesn't end here, by the way. There are other platforms that would be more than happy to house these apps, as Faisal said here.
Even if such an app is taken off from, say, Android Play Store or any such thing, such apps are still available on these third-party marketplaces, which anyone can access and download these APKs or which may not be at times even genuine APKs, or which may be uploaded by someone with some ulterior object. Those app stores also need to be scrutinized, and we need to have a look of those app stores also, whether first of all they should be there, and if they should be there, then what is the mechanism.
We spent a good amount of time discussing apps that are available on platforms like Play Store and App Store. But have you thought about the ones that come pre installed on your phone and you cannot get rid of?
Unfortunately, most of the devices which we are using, especially in the Android ecosystem, are made in China. Most of the time, there is these apps which are pre-installed on devices. If you take any phone of Xiaomi or Lava or Oppo or Xiaomi, or you take any brand, I'm not even going to say that some brands do it and some don't. Every brand installs a long list of apps and SDKs in the background. As a consumer, you don't even have a choice to remove them. You have to just live with them. These apps are in general Chinese because they are baked at the time when the phone is manufactured. And these apps are known to be stealing your data, generating ads, clicking on your behalf, and so on and so forth consistently. In fact, there has been a lot of cases where OEMs, without realizing it, ended up installing a malware. That malware kept quiet for 6 months to 1 year till the time the phone was being monitored. But after 1 year, the OEM went ahead focusing on other models. And this malware started spamming consumers with ads, triggering push notifications, changing ads even on apps which normally don't have any ads, like the camera app or the contact app, all of which was done where the OEM actually didn't even make money on this because someone in the background had actually installed that app when the phone was being built and generated. The Chinese ecosystem, where the hardware is in their control, the root installs of apps which are done ends up also impacting the security of Indians. And I think that's something which the government of India should definitely wake up and take notice.
Here's the thing. Faisal, right at the beginning of the episode, said that there are also credible players in the Chinese ecosystem who mean business, and they're being hurt or could potentially suffer damages by these policy decisions.
There is also case of very credible and serious players out there in the market. Again, going back to OEMs, we have, for instance, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, and many others. All of them are of China origin. Now, along with selling their hardware devices, they are now into an ecosystem of IoT ecosystem or smart home ecosystem, which essentially means they have to have apps in addition to devices. Now, if this trend of banning Chinese apps keeps on happening, it definitely hampers business of these serious players who are there, have a level of credibility and reputation, and are least likely to be doing anything which could be a matter of concern and could hurt consumer interest, because they are here for some serious business.
According to a Reuters report, the Chinese government too is worried about India's decision to ban these apps.
Days after the Indian government banned over 50 Chinese apps, Beijing reacted to the development. A spokesperson for the Chinese Commerce Ministry reportedly said that the ban damages legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies. Gao Feng has been quoted as saying that Delhi has been taking several measures to put pressure on Chinese enterprises and related services in India. The Chinese official added that Beijing hopes that Delhi will take concrete measures to maintain the sound development momentum of bilateral economic and trade cooperation, as per reports.
India is a large market, and more importantly, this image doesn't bode well for the Chinese government. In fact, India has taken the lead to ban these Chinese apps, and maybe other countries will follow. And that is not something that Beijing would want. And so, Faisal and Dhiraj said the Chinese government would be working in overdrive to clean up the act of these apps.
If, as a consumer, you're using an app, which is a free app, and you're not paying any subscription, then your data is your subscription. If you're using apps and we're using free apps, and all of us do use those, whether it is say Facebook, for example, or TikTok or Instagram or WhatsApp for that matter, data is being collected, it is being used for profiling, it's being used for targeting, it's being used for running advertising. Chinese apps have been able to use this data to do more ad fraud and malware fraud. They have been caught a lot of times injecting clicks in the background. There have been a lot of cases where Chinese apps were actually watching videos on YouTube as if you were watching them, and they were actually generating revenue for their masters through the advertising world. If you, as a consumer using a free app, then you need to be aware that your data is going to be used. In Chinese apps, this case becomes slightly more stringent in the sense that they're able to use your data for more nefarious purposes. And finally, I think the geopolitical situation obviously plays out. Chinese apps are under the control of the Chinese government, which means that they will always be sharing data with the Chinese government, which can always be used against the country. I'm sure all of you have seen activations on Vodafone Airtel, where you said, I never activated for this service, for some digital service, and it starts coming into your bill. All of that practically now is happening through apps in the background and malware apps. And a lot of those are being triggered by Chinese developers. You can actually be forcefully getting Bitcoining mining being done on your phone without you realizing it. Bitcoin mining has been banned on the Google Play Store. But if you are, going to third-party app stores and installing apps, then you might be subjected to this. So when consumers complain that their phones are overheating and are hot all the time, 9 out of 10, you have a malware on your phone, which is taking up your CPU and probably doing Bitcoining or watching videos on your behalf.
If you thought that was bad and are quickly checking to see if your phone is overheated, you might want to sit down while you listen to the next one.
Google is now junking the Google advertising ID. So for people who are not aware, on your phone, there is an advertising ID called the Google advertising ID. If you go into your settings in Google, in ads, you will see your identifier. It's 36 digits. You can actually reset it. This ID is the one which is used for tracking you, right? This ID is unique to you. Every time you install an app, every time you buy something, every time you subscribe to something, this device ID is used to track you. And this is the way by which your data is sold in the market. I'm talking only on privacy right now. Two things can be done. First of all, you should definitely reset your device ID as many times as you can. The moment you reset your device ID on Google, all the past tracking or databases built up on your profile are now changed and no longer accessible. Second is that Google, as I was talking about, is going to now roll out in April onwards. It is going to match the policy which Apple had, where this ID can be blocked from being passed over to any app. So you can say that I don't want this ID. You can delete this ID. And as an Android customer, that means that any app which wants this ID will actually get zeros. They will get 00000, and you can delete your ID. This is a great step. I would recommend consumers to go and do that. You can already do that on OS 12 and 13 on Android versions 12 and 13. And from April onwards, it will be available for prior versions as well. The only thing which Google has screwed up, in my opinion, is that it is not a default option.
If you want to disable the Google advertising ID, follow these steps. Step 1. Go to your settings and scroll down to Google Services and Preferences. Step 2. Click on Ads. Step 3. Click on Reset Advertising ID. Step 4. You're done. I know I digressed, but it was for a good cause, so totally worth it. But coming back to what we were discussing, if you're looking to be more digitally Swachh, as Dhiraj said, listen in to some pointers from Faisal about what you can look at as red flags when downloading an app.
I think one of the key factors for anyone to check on is who is publishing the app. For instance, install Economic Times app. I should be definitely checking whether the app is coming from Economic Times or something else. Okay. Then there could be some typo squatting in terms of somebody just spelling it around, say, EKO, and playing with the spelling out there. In the Android ecosystem, if you just check for ABC Bank, there will be at least 10-15 apps coming into the list. So one has to really check on whether I'm exactly installing app the of the bank which I want to install. So who is the publisher? That's important. Then you could also check on what's the likely number of installs. So obviously, there is more likeliness that the genuine app would have more installations done than something running parallel. Uh, there could be some help taken from reviews. And lastly, I think one has to be very cognizant of what kind of permissions is app asking. For instance, an app to do with maybe audio only is asking for a permission of camera. I think that's a trigger point.
This is apart from making sure that you use reputed, globally accepted apps and domains. Even if you're not keen on parting with money, try to use their freemium versions. Also, please don't get lured easily. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. The government seems committed to banning these Chinese apps, and both Faisal and Dhiraj said it was not just posturing as some believed. They said that the ban was one that was a step in the right direction to safeguard our data, and in fact went on to add that the government should be more proactive at closely identifying and banning more shady Chinese apps. While China might be fuming at the imposition of these sanctions, it is our Desi apps that are laughing their way to the bank and waltzing onto our phone screens. Geopolitical or not, it's a win-win for India either way, our guest said. I leave you with something that Dhiraj said, which might provide you with some food for thought.
In my opinion, privacy is already a lost war. I'm sorry to say that. We as we become more and more digitally active, we are already giving away our privacy to these apps. The question actually is no longer about privacy. The question actually is, how do these apps manage our privacy? How do they manage our data? So the question should not be privacy, but managing privacy.
Thank you, Faisal and Dhiraj. That's all from us this Tuesday. I'm your host, Dia Rekhi, and you've been listening to Digital Swachh Abhiyan on the Morning Brief. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share it on your social media. If you think we saved a lot of your data being compromised with the pointers we gave you on the episode, make sure to write to us with your feedback on themorningbrief@timesgroup.com. Producers for the episode, Surbhi Modi from ET and Varun Kapahi from Awaz. Sound editor, Saundarya Jayachandran from Awaz. Executive producer, Arijit Burman. All clips used in the episode belong to their respective owners. Credits mentioned in the description.